Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Heat are down to their last chance, but they've been here before. Also, the Hawks had a chance to prove their quality, and we look at how the Vikings could move up for their quarterback. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on a classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free in the App Store or Google Play.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
If last year was any indication, the Heat have the NBA right where they want them. But they also had the Philadelphia 76ers right where they wanted them last night with a double-digit halftime lead. But the Sixers, 36 points in the fourth quarter. Joel Embiid came alive. There were three-point plays everywhere, and the Sixers rallied to win. They will be the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. From Locked On Heat, Wes Goldberg joins me now. And Wes, as I mentioned, this was what we saw last year from the Miami Heat in a similar situation. And you and I have been talking on this program. I'm sure you guys have been talking on Locked On Heat as well about like, hey, when are the Heat going to look like the team we expected them to be? We did kind of see that tonight for stretches.
We did, right? We saw a whole lot of the zone defense. We saw sort of role players who maybe a lot of people hadn't heard of until this play-in game, making shots and making plays. And it was basically everything you needed from the Miami Heat except Jimmy Butler. And that was sort of the common denominator last year was Jimmy Butler taking it up a notch, turning into playoff Jimmy, giving the Heat what they needed. And the Heat also, like their role players, making threes, and they missed a lot of three-point shots that they would have hoped to had made in this one too. But when Jimmy Butler hurt his right leg, and you know we're recording this right after the buzzer, so still no clarity or reports on what exactly the injury is. But he stayed in the game, but he was not the same Jimmy Butler. By the fourth quarter, he looked completely hobbled. He was basically standing in the corner, and that's when the offense was turned over to Tyler Hero and Jaime Jaquez Jr. And you know they made shots, they missed a bunch of shots, and at the end of the day, it just wasn't enough to keep up with the 76ers and Nick Batum, who turned into the second coming of Steph Curry during this game. But hey, that's the play-in tournament for you, right? Like just one guy can get hot, that can win you a game, and that can get you a series against the New York Knicks instead of the Boston Celtics. And that's where we are. And now the Heat have to play again on Friday. And
the Jimmy Butler part of this, you know, the injury, we know that is a big factor here. But the Stars on the other side also did not play well for Philadelphia. I mean, Joel Embiid was 6 of 17, and albeit in a limited health, we don't know what percentage he is, but the answer is probably not 100% or whatever passes for 100 at this point in the season. Tyrese Maxey was 6 of 16. If I'd have told you going into the game that they were going to be combined, 12 for 33, you probably would have said the Heat won by 8 to 12.
Yeah. Look, you said he's not 100%. I don't know that he's 50% at this point, the way that he was looking. This was, you saw how Joel Embiid was moving, and you're like, wow, this game should have been an easy win for Miami. And by the way, I think it should have been. Every time they ran a high pick and roll, they got a wide open jumper for Tyler Hero, for Jaime, for Jimmy, for anybody, for Caleb Martin, whoever was doing it. They just missed so many shots tonight. Miami ended up shooting 42% overall, 38 of 90 overall, and they just needed more looks. And at the end of the day, they got a couple of big offensive rebounds for Joel Embiid. Whatever he had left, he provided that in the fourth quarter. And then you got some big baskets from some of their role players. But you're absolutely right. Like, you couldn't have laid this out better if you were Miami outside of the Jimmy Butler injury. And the Butler injury is not an excuse because, like you mentioned, Philadelphia's best player had been dealing with an injury from the tip. So, it's a tough loss for the Heat, no doubt about it. But they did this last year where they got out-rebounded by the Atlanta Hawks in the first play-in game, had to go and beat the Chicago Bulls in their second play-in game, ended up falling from the 7th seed to the 8th seed because of the play-in tournament, and then they went on their little run there, obviously. And so they hope to do it again, but it's not going to matter if Jimmy Butler and this injury is something that's lingering.
Why then did we not see some of the players who have been essential role players for the Heat all season long. Duncan Robinson, it's far be it for me to question Eric Spoelstra, who's arguably the best coach in the NBA. But I mean, I noticed you mentioned it during the game. Like, we just didn't see some of these guys.
And Duncan Robinson was available, but he's been dealing with this lower back injury for the last month. He missed like 5 or 6 games in a row, came back for 4 or 5 games, then missed the last 5 games to end the season. Spo said that he was available before the game. I was a little surprised that we did not see him, especially on a night where they were struggling to make those open jumpers from the perimeter, but they know better than anybody else what Duncan Robinson, what kind of shape he's in. And if they didn't feel like he was ready to go, then that's probably why he didn't play in this game. And Spo went with the guys that he trusted: Kevin Love, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Haywood Highsmith. There was a lot of DeLon Wright minutes in this game, and that's just sort of where the Heat have gotten to this year. It's been the story all season for Miami. The 5th most games lost to injury in the entire NBA. 35 different starting lineups, including a brand new one introduced a week and a half ago because of the latest bout of injuries. And this has just been sort of part and parcel for what the Heat season has been. And yeah, even if you do get Rozier and Duncan Robinson back for Friday, you might not have Jimmy Butler for Friday. So it just seems like one injury after another.
Stay up to date all year on the Miami Heat by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, the Atlanta Hawks had a chance to show their mettle. Before we get to that, the NBA dropped the hammer. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. You can also combine the prop bets into a same game parlay for an even bigger payout. On the Diamondbacks and Giants get together for a crucial series, even though it's only the first month of the season. FanDuel likes the Giants at home to win the money line, -174. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories in sports without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinion, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A gambling scandal in the NBA ended a career. The Toronto Raptors' Jontay Porter has been banned from the league after an investigation revealed he had disclosed confidential information to bettors, limited his participation in at least one game while he was with the Raptors, and bet on NBA games while playing in the G League. With sports gambling integrating into every walk of life, this is the highest punishment a player has received in the U.S. In fact, this isn't even the end of the story. The NBA said in releasing the Porter ban announcement that its investigation remains open and that it is sharing information with federal authorities. Klay Thompson said it was too early to think about if he's played his last game as a Warrior, but he is also grateful for his teammates' endorsements.
It means a lot. I mean, we've been through the highest of highs and lows. Whether it's losing a championship, winning a championship, missing the playoffs, we've been through everything together. So that does mean a lot, and makes me grateful to have the times I've had with them. Like, done some pretty historic stuff.
Tell me if you've heard this one before. Zion Williamson will miss time with an injury. The Pelicans forward has been ruled out of Friday's play-in tournament elimination game against the Sacramento Kings with a left hamstring strain, the team announced Wednesday. Should the Pelicans advance, though, he will remain out. The team said an MRI on Wednesday confirmed the injury, and Williamson will be reevaluated in approximately 2 weeks. Just cannot get his body to cooperate. It is such a shame. In Major League Baseball, the Dodgers were shut out by the Nationals. Yeah, is that right? The Nationals?
And I know you can't put this on Landon Knack. He was fantastic. 4 perfect innings through his 5. He did very well. He gave up 4 hits, 2 runs, 4 Ks, and a walk. So I'm not complaining about Landon Knack. He did more than enough to get the Dodgers this win, right? But how in the heck are they unable to even produce 1 run? Shohei Ohtani with 3 hits. Mookie Betts, no hits. Freddie Freeman, no hits. 1 walk for Freddie. Will Smith, 0 for. Max Muncy, 1 for 4. Teoscar Hernandez, 0 for. James Outman had a nice double. Kike pinch hit for him, 0 for. Pajes, 0 for. And Lux, 0 for.
The Atlanta Hawks and Chicago Bulls, no strangers to the play-in tournament. Each team with very different stakes as to where these teams would go next if they didn't make it. The Bulls ultimately prevail 131-116 in a game where the Bulls came out absolutely scorching. The Hawks answered in the second quarter, and then the Bulls were able to counterpunch the counterpunch, and they will be getting their opportunity to make the Eastern Conference playoffs. Brad Rowland from Locked On Hawks joins me now. And Brad, the reason I said I think these teams have different things at stake is because the Hawks went in more recently in a big way to make this all work, and it just hasn't. What is the biggest reason why?
Yeah, like you said, they're really invested. I think it's lots of things, but in the end, it's simple in some ways. You can't build a team that is good enough to do what they want to do when you have a bottom 5 defense. And that was on full display in this game. Now, granted, there were reasons for that. There were personnel challenges. The Hawks were without 3 or 4 of their better defenders, key guys. And, this game is an outlier on that. But it also is kind of indicative of what they've dealt with this entire time. They had offensive flashes in this game, and they did enough offensively in a vacuum to win. But defensively, it was really bad and really ugly the entire way. And I think that's not a secret in Atlanta, but certainly that's where you have to start with any discussion about the Hawks right now.
Yeah, Trae Young, 4 for 12 in this game. Did have 22 and 10 and 11 of 13 at the free throw line. It seems like that is going to be the pivot point of this offseason. What do they do with Trae Young and DeJounte Murray as you see it, Brad? What are their options?
I think they have several. It's one of those things where I do believe, as many have said, and it's not like groundbreaking, that it is likely in my mind and what I've heard and what's been out there in the ether that they move on from one of their 2 guards, Trae Young or DeJounte Murray. I think that partnership has run its course in both my view and kind of the view of the league, I think, at this point. The question is whether they actually would press the nuclear option of Trae and Trae Young, who they've built their whole team around for the last 5-6 years. Yeah. I've still never heard internally that they're really seriously considering that, but it's kind of been out there, and maybe this season wakes them up on some level and changes their mind. Murray was publicly out there as a prominent trade candidate. They came pretty close to trading DeJounte Murray just 2.5 months ago. So I think he'll be available as well. And maybe it's an evaluation. It's as simple as who can they get more for, who can they kind of pivot around, and how likely is it, or how willing are they to kind of take a step back from even where they are now? Because if you trade Trae Young, you're not going to probably get better in the short term. So it's more of an organizational thing than anything. But I do think if I had to guess right now in mid-April, one of those guys at the very least will not be back next year.
What is the case for keeping Trae Young at this point, given that he is probably the guy that will fetch more in a theoretical trade? There might be teams that go, hey, we would love a guy who can fill it up the way that he can at his best. Why would that not be on the table if you're Atlanta?
I think the case to keep him is a fairly straight ahead one. It's that, number one, he is the best player they've had in 30 years. And that organizationally for the city, that does matter. I know that, some markets, it's like kind of an eye roll, but he really is their best and most marketable player they've had since Dominique Wilkins. And I was a small child when he was playing. So it's been a long time. That's one thing. They have, as much as it was probably not indicative of how good they were, they did make a conference finals with him as the best player on a team that they really didn't even have a number 2 on that team. He was the clear and head and shoulders number 1 on a team that was a Final Four team 3 years ago. So that's
and
the
if
case.
You listen to Trey tell it, they were a finals team. If he doesn't,
that's the case for it is that, and I think that he is probably underrated now, as crazy as that sounds for a player that I would have thought coming into the league had the makeup of being a player that was going to be overrated. 6'1" guard, defensive problems. It's like, in my mind, probably going to be over. I think it's almost gone too far on him at this point. But anyway, I do think that the case for keeping him is that he is still an excellent offensive player, and the Hawks have done a pretty poor job for 3 years now building around him. So I think you could sort of reasonably convince yourself that if they had done a better job, or if they did a better job supporting him, they could be a top 5 team in the East kind of level. Can you win a championship with him as your best player? I've always been skeptical of that. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think that there's maybe a happy medium there. And, I don't know what that looks like, but certainly it's kind of easy. And there's almost the caricature case on both sides of this. And it's kind of where the Hawks land and how nuanced they want to be and how they want to kind of start from here, because this 2 or 3 year sample size is pretty frustrating.
Stay up to date all year on the Atlanta Hawks by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Hawks on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, we look at the path for the Vikings to trade up for their quarterback. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime, and the scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire in the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the Apple Store or Google Play. The Vikings need a quarterback. It's most likely they'll need to make a deal to move up in the first round to get their guy. The ultimate NFL mock draft shows how the Vikings can do it.
Minnesota's trading up. Pick 11, pick 23, and a 2025 first going to Arizona. We get pick 4, as well as pick 71 and a third rounder next year.
Excellent. All right.
I was working the phones a lot here. The Vikings are very determined to trade up. They know the Giants are looking at JJ McCarthy. They know that if they want a serious quarterback, they're going to have to leapfrog him at 6. So I was working the phones. I talked to everybody in the top 6, including I even reached out to Patricia, but I talked to everybody except for the Bears. I knew the Bears were locked in at number 1. Talked about a lot of interesting ideas. Ultimately settled on this trade up with Arizona, and that's probably an overpay to 3 first-round picks for QB4. Most of the time, it's an overpay, but you got to do what you got to do. It's either that or start coping with Bo Nix. I'm taking the overpay every single time.
Matt, what do you think? An overpay? 3 first-round picks to go from 11 to number 4, presumably for JJ McCarthy. 11, 23, a 2025 first. We heard Luke Braun lay out how hard it was to get up, how expensive it was to get up, and even recognize, you know what? To go up and get a quarterback, it's probably an overpay. Is it worth it, though, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, so I was at the owners' meetings, and some people very much in the know think McCarthy could go as early as 2. I mean, and I went, wow, okay. I mean, I guess I believe you. You know more than me. And I do think the Vikes are an ideal nest. I mean, they got tackles, they got receivers, Hawkinson. I think they have a very good coach that's obviously quarterback friendly. And I give Luke credit for finagling 2 third-round picks, I think, out of it, too. 1 this year, 1 next year. So it's a little something in return. But I am never giving up 3 first-round picks for JJ McCarthy. I'm sorry. That's a lot.
It is funny to me that after all of the changes that were supposedly made in the Vikings front office and all of the Ivy League thinking that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah was supposed to bring to the Minnesota Vikings, and the apparently smart draft trades and restocking the roster and retooling with younger players, moving the old expensive veterans out, clearing cap space, that they would land on a quarterback who even his biggest supporters will tell you in a best case scenario is probably just Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins at his peak, top 12 kind of quarterback, top 10 even, but with obvious limitations, not in the kind of tier that you would want if you're trading multiple future first-round picks for a top 5 selection at quarterback. Is that funny to anybody else? Just me? It's fine. You can catch all 6 episodes of the ultimate NFL mock draft on Locked On NFL. And finally, someone tried to steal from Augusta, and it ended predictably. Richard Glebensky has been charged in federal court in Illinois in the transport of millions of dollars worth of Masters merchandise and memorabilia stolen from Augusta National Golf Club in Georgia. A document filed Tuesday in U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois accuses Glowinski of transporting across state lines to Tampa, Florida, knowing that these items had been stolen, converted, and taken by fraud. This all began when in 2017, a Georgia company filed a lawsuit to stop a Florida-based auction from selling a green jacket that the company says should have never been available for purchase. Let me check. Nope, this is not Shooter McGavin we're talking about here. Wow, incredible. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports today, we get you set for the NFL Draft, the 2024 NFL Draft. So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.